Hi everybody, my name is Sarah Sandahl and I'm doing a presentation on Chapter 19 for Digital Imaging and Photography. So if you want to go ahead and open up the presentation, we'll take a look at that first slide, and the first slide is the introduction. And I'm just going to go through briefly some things that stuck out to me from that part. The first thing that really stuck out to me was the lack of privacy and kind of that social surveillance. Everybody watches what you're doing because all your digital images are online and they're very aware of what your life is like through that. The other thing that stuck out to me is there's a little bit of narcissism in our society as everyone's taking selfies and seems kind of absorbed in their own world, and sometimes unfortunately it's easy to fall into that, and I think digital imaging can kind of feed that idea as well. The other thing was that it's difficult to tell when you look at a digital image whether it's real or if it's something that's been edited or manipulated in some way. Moving on to the next slide, going through the background information. The first photograph was taken in 1826 by a man named Joseph Nipsey, and I hope I said that right, but he took a picture of a landscape and it took about 8 hours for that exposure to develop. And then the first photo manipulation was taken in 1906, and that was a picture of an earthquake, and it's believed that that picture might have been altered as much as 30%. Then the author went on to talk a little bit about some different photographic improvements. Kodak was the first to come up with the first digital camera in 1975, and in 1990 the first DSC camera, or digital still camera, was introduced. Some differences between the 35mm and the DSC camera. When you're using a DSC camera, when the light comes in, it actually hits a sensor which creates an electrical charge, and when depending on the size of that sensor and the number of the picture elements, that's kind of what determines the quality or the resolution of the image. It's the number of those the number of those picture elements are called pixels, and so that's where that keyword comes in. Pixels are actually not in color, they're in gray, but then there's mathematical manipulations that they do to that, and then there's filters, and then that's how we get the color picture album. If you move on to the next slide, going to recent developments, the author didn't feel that at this time when this book was written that there were a whole lot of hardware improvements, although he did mention the interchangeable lens compact camera. He did mention some improvements in the digital image resolution. When he was writing this, at the time, it used to be that the digital pictures weren't quite as good as the 35mm pictures as far as quality, but that they had caught up to that, and then he also said that mobile phone pictures weren't as good as quality as film, and I'm not sure on that because I think the iPhone could take some pretty good pictures now, so I'm not real sure on that. But you got to kind of look at too when it comes to like mobile phones and stuff. A lot of times people aren't really looking for a high quality picture because the whole purpose is to be able to share. They're thinking about shareability and functionality with that. So I think that comes into play there. He mentioned the Lytro camera, which is a camera that could take a picture and then later could go in and focus the picture, but they had some problems with compatibility, and your editing options were pretty limited after that. And of course, memory cards increase in read speeds and memory, and we'll probably continue to see that go on. Going on to the next slide, software improvements, which is kind of under the recent developments tab, but it needed its own slide because it's got so much information. The first thing is the software and apps for photo manipulation. The first one is Phase 1, and that is a program that actually lets you create your own applications for taking pictures and also processing them. And then we have Photoshop, and Photoshop, among many things, enables you to edit your photos in real time. And then you also have Adobe's Creative Cloud, which helps make the workflow process a lot easier and makes it easy to upload or move content to various devices, whether it's your personal computer, your mobile phone, or your tablet. On your mobile devices, some things available there is they do have Adobe Photoshop Touch that you can do some image editing with, and then there's also photo syncing between devices where you can have the same picture. Let's say that you take a picture on your phone, but then you sync it with your iPad, which also syncs it with your computer. And some of the programs enable people to do that. I personally have used iCloud, but there's Revel and Google+. And then, of course, on these mobile devices, when you take a picture, you have your app for Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and then you just automatically upload it to that. So all those apps make it so easy to share all this information. Lastly in this section, the digital image formats. A picture has a RAW file, and that's before it's compressed and processed. It was difficult because different manufacturers have different RAW files, and so that poses compatibility issues naturally. They did have JPEG format that was used, and then that had some issues, and then Adobe introduced the digital negative format, or DNG, and then Google introduced the WebP format in the hopes that would help the web process faster because the pictures would be smaller, but they would be richer. Moving on to the next slide, as far as the current status, at this section the author seemed to kind of move a little bit more into kind of where the areas of growth would be and kind of from a more economic standpoint. And he felt that there would be less printing off of images because of the economy. People don't have money to spend on them anyway to print off pictures as much as they used to, and also because if you're wanting other people to see your pictures, all you have to do is share them, and that doesn't cost anything. You can share them online. But he did think that photo book publishing would be an area of growth, and I thought that was just an interesting idea. I was wondering, it made me kind of wonder if he was alluding to more the fact that we live in a society where, especially if you're going to do marketing, everything has to be so customer centric and so individualized. People just really are just very responsive to that. And I wonder if being able to create those custom products makes that, like you put a picture of your kids on your handbag or whatever, it makes it more personalized, more unique to you, and in a culture that values that, maybe that's why. He also said that although our reasons for taking pictures is to preserve memories, millennials are more likely to share that on social media, like over half the time, versus other generations maybe would only share that about 30% of the time. Moving on to the next slide, as far as factors to watch, of course, Moore's Law, continued increases in storage capacity, and then also the digital still camera vanishing point and convergence of technology, as he says. Just as we come up with more and more gadgets that are able to keep up the same quality and image enhancements and do the things that the older cameras could do, but only better. And personally, maybe even in smaller packages, I was kind of fascinated. It's kind of off on a tangent, but like with the Apple Watch and the capabilities that has, and yet such a smaller gadget, yet working towards keeping up with a lot of those things that we look for, like in our iPhones or our Android phones. And then the other thing was, again, the difficulty being able to tell between real and manipulated images, and I'm interested to see how this all plays out, if the government would get involved or not, especially since we rely, in the past have relied on that so much on images and photographs for like criminal investigations and the like. It'd just be interesting to see how that all pans out in the future. And then lastly, kind of related to that, privacy issues. The author pointed out that maybe the government could use images to punish civil disobedience. My dad brought up a point that, like for instance in the Ferguson case, they could take a picture of all the people that were in the crowd and then use facial recognition software to find those people online, maybe through their different social media images out there, and then be able to hunt them down and punish them or whatever. And there's just so many different things that come into play with this whole area and even the whole internet. And but moving on to the next question, to the next slide, is actually where my question is. One of the things I always ask myself at my job is, how can I do this better? How can I be more efficient? How can I make the quality better? How can I get the customer to like what we like even more, and give them more than what they expected? And so my question is, whether it be for work or for personal use, in what ways might hyperphotography be helpful for you personally? Going back to the slide and the factors to watch, they meant there was listed in there hyperphotography, and hyperphotography has to do with digital images that are actually interactive, that tell you more about themselves. And I'd be interested to see what creative applications of that technology you could come up with that you think would be helpful for you personally at your job or at home. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and thank you for listening to this presentation. Bye.